to you.
The fights must never end. Show me mortality. Give yourself. Let the blood dance begin.
everyone, Clayton here, and I am here for a build guide for 3.21 Inquisitor Explode Totems. This build is unique to this league and it's available via the Crucible mod on the Crucible skill tree, and I'm pretty sure that you're already aware of this build. The first thing that I want to mention is that the Totem Explode build is not a spell or attack, and how this build works is for you to be able to throw traps, and the traps to summon totems, and the totems exploding, and to deal physical damage as a percentage of its max life. So this is not a dot build. This is different from the Pathfinder builds out there, and the reason for making this build is because I believe that this build has a higher ceiling than dot builds with a damage cap of 35 million damage. And the reason for this is I think we can outscale that, and I'll show you the reasons below. For the methods of scaling this build, we are using conversion to cold, so converting the physical damage explosion to cold, subsequently scaling that cold damage via percentage elemental or percentage cold damage, and then subsequently scaling that via crit chance and crit multi, via brittle, Watcher's Eye, and generic crit chance via Assassin's Smart plus crit multi scaling. Last but not least, to be able to increase our DPS, we have trap throw speed, which will also improve your quality of life for mapping and movement in boss fights. The key build problems that all totem builds will face will be a range of mana, be able to sustain the mana regeneration, the damage that you're able to deal, how you scale that damage, the speed, the ability to be able to move in maps, move in boss fights, the clear, for you to be able to clear packs and maps, survivability to be able to survive, as well as single target triggering of traps. So for mana, we solve it by going Inquisitor, and over here we have the phys path, and this regens energy shield via the amount of life regen we have, and for that we go Eldritch Battery, and this solves all mana problems. For Pathfinder, you probably go something like Replicas or Divine or Burden of Truth as a method of regenerating mana when you use your flask. For damage, I mentioned the methods of scaling damage above. For Pathfinder, you go something like Mings Heart or Obliteration as the comparison over here. For speed, it's going to either come from movement speed or movement skills, and for us we go Lisa because we're going to be using 200% because they don't appear in the rules. An alternative for this will be 110 plus shield for mapping. It may be faster. And versus Pathfinder builds, we are a little bit slower because Pathfinder has a flask effect with the Quicksilver and they move a little bit faster. In terms of survivability, we're going very generic armor evasion scaling with our gear, and subsequently we also have some form of ES and life hybrid recovery along with Glorious Vanity. We're able to split damage, and this gives us increased effective HP. Also during mapping, we're able to use Vile Molten Shell as well as Vile Grace to be able to increase our effective HP when it comes to very tricky fights when it comes to doing the Crucible, because those are very deadly. Single target triggering, for bossing, this is very important to be able to have increased the trap trigger AoE to have it feel good. If not, you'll notice that some of the traps actually don't trigger if they're slightly off. As well as diversion cluster traps, this is mandatory for the build to be able to have a small range of traps being thrown as opposed to being wider spread. The key differences between Inquisitor and Pathfinder will be the on-hit versus the DOT portion, and Pathfinder doesn't need to stand in DPS, however the Inquisitor will have a higher burst window when it comes to pre-stacking and being able to deal more damage above the dot cap. In terms of survivability, Pathfinder does have a little bit better defenses and more defensive options, going phys as elemental instead of armor and evasion, and they have better survivability over there. So how to get started? So the Mark 1 of the build before you get to this point is dropping jewels. You don't really need them, and I recommend some Glorious Vanity with cold conversion on the tree, and you can get this via this Glorious Vanity, and you can convert 20% here. The gloves, what I'm using is this glove over here with 20% conversion as the implicit, so I'm using a Grand Eater, Ikers, and for the explicit, that's a build mod. So you can opt for different other methods of converting, but this is the method that I went for. And subsequently, you want to get brittle, and you'll notice that before you scale your crit via Hatred Crit or things like Bottle of Faith, you will notice that it's going to be sometimes a bit tricky to inflict brittle, but you typically don't need brittle at all for mapping. because you already have so much damage. When it comes to single target and uber bosses, Assassin's Mark will be sufficient to be able to inflict crit, and then you get 50% non-damaging elements of crit to be able to increase your brittle on uber bosses. So you just need one 300% explode weapon, you don't actually need two, and I've done uber bosses with just a single weapon. And the method to be able to get brittle on your build is using Secrets of Suffering. That's the method I chose, and you can get that either by an alternating scepter or an interrogation jewel. Other methods to be able to get that is Leadership's Price via brittle conflux or Gilsight, which is one of the Inquisitors I saw on the tree, opting for this version. Next, we come to the DPS calculation for the build. So the build scales by scaling totem life. That is the first aspect of the build, the base HP of the totem. To find that, you can go to calculations under Devouring Totem, and you'll be able to see your totem life over here. For us, we are scaling totem life by getting the Primal Manifestation cluster and anointing Ironwood. An additional method that you can scale or improve this build is by getting an impossible escape with Iron Reflexes. Last I checked, it was 10 divines. When I first started building this build, it was already 7 divines. And then you can use that anointment for something else to increase your damage further. But for me, I felt like that wasn't necessary and just went with the anointment. So the total life is 7,300 damage, and we multiply that by 6 with 2 weapons of 300%, and we get 43,000 raw damage, physical raw damage per explosion for each totem. Assuming that there's no additional detonation for 21 traps, we get this amount of damage. It's actually times 2 over here, but we don't need this calculation as we calculate it further down. 10% chance to detonate additional time, and this is how we calculate it. For 23 traps, we have additional chance to explode for 18%, and how we get 18% is via 10% from Clever Construction, and subsequently the Trap Mastery to be able to get 8% additional chance to trigger. Further down, we are able to multiply that by 2 because every trap we throw summons 2 totems, giving you 54.28 totems being summoned in a preload. With the additional detonation, we calculate the total damage to be 43,000 HP times 54 minus 2 because it has to have 2 totems summoned, and every additional totem that's summoned will start exploding, giving you a total of 2.2 million physical damage for a preload. We use this number and we input this into the config over here. So if you were to see this config, you then add a physical amount of damage to spells, to ethereal knives. So we'll use this to be a level 1 EK to be able to simulate the damage, and POB does all the damage conversion for you, and it does the application of crit and everything to be able to give you this final number over here. Okay. So the damage is a little different because I may have changed one of the configs. So further down, we have the amount of damage you can get for 1 throw of POB, and there's 330 million. So we calculate a 1 throw by the totem HP times 5 traps times 2, which is 10, multiplied by the additional chance to trigger, and then you input that value over here in the POB, and that will give you your damage. So I think I'm currently in a mapping setup, so if I were to switch back from Grace to Skitterbots and Purity, and that will give you the correct number over here that you see in the POB. Okay, so the same thing we have for the trap throw speed over here. So we multiply the total DPS by the trap throw speed multiplied by each throw, giving you a total of 1.2 billion damage. So it's very similar to the preload damage because we already have such high throw speed to be able to get a maximum number of traps thrown within a second. So that is the build. In terms of upgrades, we're able to possibly move EB into the weapon, and then we can save 2 passive points for more damage or defenses. An impossible escape for Iron Reflexes that I mentioned, as well as transitioning to a bow, and this will give you potentially a higher ceiling. We can also get multi-totem within the Crucible mod, a 70% chance to summon 2 totems, and then subsequently we use Empower. And having that on the bow is very beneficial because we can get a +2 supported socketed gems to be able to give additional 2 levels to the Empower and scaling the build further. So I imagine that the build can have a ceiling of above 2 billion damage, and this is the on-hit version which I built for this league. Hopefully you enjoyed the build guide, and see you in the next one. If you liked the video, please like, share and subscribe.